Hello and welcome to this edition of the Leighton Cassette Podcast. And today I'll be covering the 1998 cult classic, The Faculty. The idea for The Faculty goes back to 1990, when David Wechter and Bruce Kimmel wrote the first draft of the screenplay. There were no buyers, and the script floated around Hollywood for years. However, after the success of Scream, Miramax bought the script, and the Weinstein brothers brought in Kevin Williamson to do rewrites. Williamson wrote the first two Scream movies and also created the hit TV show Dawson's Creek, so he was at the height of his popularity at this time. I think last week if I didn't mention it, but last week we covered Varsity Blues, and the star of that movie, James Van Der Beek, was Dawson in Dawson's Creek. I wasn't sure if I mentioned that or not, but I just wanted to get it out there just in case I'd forgotten to. He was set to direct, but chose not to do so, Williamson that is, because he decided to direct Teaching Miss Tingle, a script he wrote himself and had whole authorship over. This film pays homage to many classics such as John Carpenter's The Thing, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, a little bit of Stepford Wives, and a dash of The Breakfast Club for good measure. This has become a classic B-movie, while taking a little of this and that from all those other classic B-movies. I will try to call out some of the tropes and homages as I see them. Robert Rodriguez was then brought in as director in one of his earliest films. Marco Beltramo did the music and the soundtrack, featured Creed, Soul Asylum, Oasis, Sheryl Crow, and The Offspring. And remakes of Another Brick in the Wall Parts 1 and 2 was done by a supergroup called Class of '99. That group had Lane Staley from Alice in Chains as the lead singer, Tom Morello at lead guitar from Rage Against the Machine, Stephen Perkins as drummer, and Martin Lenoble at bass guitar, both from Jane's Addiction and Porno for Pyros. This is back when killer soundtracks were very much a part of the movie itself and the marketing of the movie. Now this is a star-studded cast with Elijah Wood as Casey Connor, no doubt a nod to the protagonist of the Terminator films, Sarah and John Connor. Josh Hartnett is Zeke Tyler. He filmed this in Halloween H2O, which came out in August 1998, almost simultaneously. Clay Duvall is Stokely. Jordana Brewster as Delilah, Laura Harris as Mary Beth, Sean Hatzy as Stan, Robert Patrick as Coach Willis, Famke Janssen as Miss Burke, B.B. Newirth as Principal Drake, Piper Laurie as Mrs. Olson, Usher, yes, that Usher, as Gabe, Jon Stewart as Mr. Edward Furlong, another Terminator nod, as the actor who played John Connor in Terminator 2's real name is Edward Furlong. Salma Hayek as Nurse Harper. Christopher McDonald as Mr. Connor. Danny Masterson as a druggie from that 70s show. And Wiley Wiggins from Dazed and Confused as his buddy. And Louis Black as Mr. Lewis. The Faculty was filmed primarily in Austin and Dallas areas of Texas, despite it taking place in Ohio. The Faculty was released Christmas Day 1998, and it managed to make $40 million against a $15 million budget. Now we open up on a football practice, and the coach losing his fucking mind worse than Coach Kilmer did last week. Stan walks off with Usher as the coach screams, flips benches, and the off-screen plays over everything going on in this scene. The coach bends down to try and fix a sprinkler that's going off, and we see someone approaching him from behind, and it seems they know him because he goes, "Yeah, what do you want?" We then cut to the principal having a meeting with a few teachers, and she is telling them, no new computers. She tells another, no field trip to New York, and she finally tells the last one, no musical this year as the school can't afford it. Mr. Tate complains that the football team gets whatever they want, and the principal agrees because the entire town comes out to the games, and that's what the school board wants, is to, siphon all funding to the football team. Mr. Tate lights up a cigarette right in the teacher's lounge. Nothing to do with the plot there. I just like to point out when I see things like that shows the difference in the era of film that I'm watching as opposed to what's going on in today's world. There was just a big controversy with Netflix because of all the smoking in Stranger Things Season 3. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but it's bullshit. Everyone's so fucking sensitive about everything. Principal Drake forgot her keys and has to go back in to retrieve them as they were all walking out. She is confronted by Coach Willis in her office. It seems he was drinking and he hits on Principal Drake as he asks for a pencil. He continues to act creepy and he shoves the pencil through her hand as she tries to rebuke him. She smacks him with her keys and she runs through the school looking for an escape, because apparently she forgot about the door she just walked in and out of 2 fucking minutes ago. She gets to a door that Mrs. Olsen is outside of, but it's locked from the inside, and neither one of them have the keys. Mrs. Olsen alerts Mr. Drake because she went back into the principal's office to get her keys as she smacked him with and she dropped them. She goes back in to get them. Mrs. Olsen alerts her that he's coming back, but she unlocks the padlock and gets outside right in the nick of time. Once outside, Mrs. Olsen now looks possessed, and she stabs the shit out of Mrs. Drake with a pair of scissors that Mrs. Drake had grabbed to protect herself from the coach, but she subsequently dropped, making her escape. We then get the title screen and cut to school the next morning. We see a cool looking car come flying into the parking lot, and then we cut to meet Casey, Stokely. We see Stan again and meet his girlfriend Delilah. Casey is bullied heavily as some of the other kids pick him up, spread his legs, and ram him groin first into the flagpole. We see Mary Beth asking some girls where the office is, and because this is the 90s and everybody's moody, they barely even look at her, and safe to say they don't answer her at all. And our main kids are introduced in the freeze frames. The frame freezes a second and their names appear, so at least we know which ones are important. We see Zeke giving some kids fake IDs. It's here that we learn that he is repeating his senior year. Fucking dumbass. Zeke throws in some scat, his own homemade drug. When one complains the picture doesn't even look like him, that would be Danny Masterson. The coach is pounding down water in the teacher's lounge, and it's here we are introduced to the rest of the teachers, complete with a Jon Stewart sighting. The timid Miss Burke calls on Zeke in class, and he seems like the smart kid who acts stupid. Stan tells Delilah that he is quitting the football team to try and get better at academics. She breaks up with him because of this and the accepted social order, as she's the head cheerleader. She even cites the accepted social order as the reason she's breaking up with him. Stan corrects Mr. Tate, who doesn't know or give a fuck what chapter they are on in their book they're reading in class. Mary Beth tries to make friends with Stokely out in the Commons area. Stokely could give a fuck. Delilah taunts Stokely because Stokely is apparently a lesbian, so I guess she must be mocked. Casey eats lunch by himself at the football field, and he finds something on the field. Coach Willis appears out of nowhere and taunts him before telling him to get lost. Back in school, Mrs. Olsen goes in to talk to the elderly Mrs. Brummel. Stokely runs into Stan again. Like, this is the second time within this first 10-15 minutes of the movie that she just runs right into him. I wonder if that pairing is going to be important at all later. Casey takes his discovery to Mr. Furlong. Mary Beth tries to befriends Stokely again, who says she is not a lesbian, but she says that so people will leave her alone. She doesn't want any friends. The whole class gather around Casey's discovery, while Mr. Furlong says it could be a new species. Usher has a few lines here, and Stokely, he's bullying Stokely, and she like pushes him with her shoulder, and it hits his arm, causing him to knock water that's in a beaker over, and it falls all over the creature, and it gives it a little life. They put it into an aquarium, and it seems to come alive. We get some shitty CGI close-ups, and Mr. Furlong goes to touch it, and it splits into two, and one of them bites him. At gym class, Stan tells Coach Willis he quits the football team. The coach says, okay. Now Stan is shocked that it would be that simple, but he takes it because fuck it, he's done. Usher and his friend go to bully Casey, but stop when Stan calls over to them. I guess Stan would be our jock, or former jock with a heart of gold. Stan goes in to take a shower, and Mrs. Brummel comes in, and she seems all fucked up. A big clump of her hair comes out, and Stan gets grossed the fuck out, as anyone would. While Mrs. Olsen is giving Stan and Casey the bullshit version of what's going on with Mrs. Brummel, Casey spots Coach standing in the middle of the field with sprinklers going off all over and around him. Zeke sells some tapes out of his trunk. I think it's supposed to have Nev Campbell, fully nude, full frontal, and Heather Graham. I don't know. It's the Wild. I believe it's Wild Things. Denise Richards. I believe that's what it is. Yes, Denise Richards. Miss Burke tries to confront him. He tries to give her laxatives and condoms, which is not really funny. It's kind of it makes Zeke look like a big creep, would be an understatement in the scene, but it's an interesting scene, I'll just put it that way. Miss Burke walks off dejected, and we see here that she is the reason that Zeke is repeating his senior year. Casey and Delilah go into the teacher's lounge. They both work on the school paper, and they're trying to find a front page story. I guess that I don't really remember that Casey saying he worked on the school paper, but I remember Delilah making an offhanded comment on it. But I bought this movie back in January because I'd been wanting to rewatch it, because it had been probably 15 plus years since I watched it, and whenever I watched it, I didn't understand why they were together. Like, I remember them doing stuff, but there was almost no setup. That was thundering pretty good outside. I don't know if you can hear it, but anyway, they go into the teacher's lounge to try and find a front page story. They quickly duck into the closet when Coach Willis and Mrs. Olsen come in. Nurse Harper comes in as they are talking about who's infected. They grab her, Coach Willis and Mrs. Olsen, and Coach Willis kind of spits something into her ear. Just then in the closet, Mrs. Brummel's body falls on top of Delilah. Coach hears some commotion over there, and he goes to check it out. And Casey and Delilah are able to fight them off and get away. And we see Principal Drake again, and she, along with Mr. Tate, listen to the kids. But when the kids see Coach Willis, Nurse Harper, and Mrs. Olsen appear, they run again and head out of the school. Casey comes back with his parents and the police. The faculty had replaced Mrs. Brummel's body with a CPR doll. Coach taunts Casey about running. There was whenever Coach was taunting Casey earlier in the movie, Casey said something like, I don't feel a person should run unless they're being chased. So that's kind of what that is a callback to. Callback from 10 minutes ago. The cop goes into the principal's office to call the nurse and Mrs. Brummel, and it's obvious when they emerge from the office that Principal Drake had infected the cop. He says this is just a kid looking for attention and the cops leave. Casey stops his mom from going into Mrs. Drake's office. She was going to go into Mrs. Drake's office to see what they could do, but Casey says, no, I'll go see the psychiatrist, because his mother had mentioned while the cops were in the office that he should go talk to a doctor. Now, Casey's parents tear apart his room looking for drugs. His father takes his phone, internet, he took the internet box, music, and porno, which is a step too far in my opinion. Casey attempts to sneak out through his bedroom window, but sees Mrs. Olson, Coach Willis, and Mr. Tate, and he falls off his roof like a dipshit. His father comes out and likely scares them off as they grab for Casey, but are gone as soon as we hear his father's voice. Casey's father drops him off at school the next morning as Creed plays and Scott Stapp tells us about how he's only 18. Delilah pulls Casey in the bathroom and they try to figure their predicament out. The faculty get a shit ton of water put into the lounge. Mary Beth pushes Stokely into Stan to force her to talk to him because she obviously likes him. Stan tells her he quit the team because he is tired of teachers and everyone kissing his ass. Mr. Tate comes in and asks the students to write a living family tree, no doubt so they can find everyone to infect. Zeke and Mary Beth formally meet, and we see a lot of students lined up outside the nurse's office. It seems they are using a faux ear exam to infect the students. Casey asks Stokely for help, and Delilah asks Stan for help, and they pair off. We see Zeke and Mary Beth getting to know each other. The Juggies come back for more scat. Miss Burke shows up dressed all sexily and berates Zeke, which he probably deserved for the way he talked to her earlier. She's obviously infected as well. Casey explains everything to Stokely in the library. She is skeptical, to say the least. They reference many pop culture examples, Body Snatchers, X-Files, Men in Black, etc. They meet back up with Delilah and Stan. They then head to Mr. Furlong's room to find the parasite Casey discovered is gone. Casey tells Stan they think aliens are taking over the school. Zeke and Mary Beth are in a storage closet to steal stuff for his scat, which is in the room beside where Casey, Stan, Delilah, and Stokely are, and they overhear them talking. They go in and fuck with Casey before Mr. Furlong comes in and Zeke tells him what Casey thinks is going on. Mr. Furlong then assaults them and tries to subdue them so he can infect them. Zeke rips the handle off of one of those big paper cutter things and slices Furlong's fingers off. He ends up stabbing Furlong in the eye with a pen that he keeps his scat in. Basically, he just takes out the little ink parts of pens and dumps the scat in, and you snort it that way. He stabs him with the scat and it kills him. The six decide to leave the school, and this is kind of like our Breakfast Club trope. They're all different, I guess Zeke would be our Judd Nelson, Stokely would kind of be Ali Sheedy, and Stan would be Emilio Estevez's character, so on. They get into Zeke's car while all their peers stare at them. They end up getting away and go to Zeke's house. It seems that Zeke's main ingredient in his scat is caffeine pills. He gets to work on the specimen Casey grabbed before they left Furlong's classroom. Zeke drops a piece of it in the mouse's cage and sees how it takes over the mouse's body. He then kills and dissects the mouse to try and understand how they take over their bodies. Stokely's theory is that if they find the leader, the queen, I guess you could say, and kill it, that everyone would go back to normal. They then accuse each other of being aliens and decide to try scat to prove they are human. This is similar to the blood test that they did in John Carpenter's The Thing. Casey goes first and is fine. Well, he tweets the fuck out, but that's to be expected. Stan forces Zeke to do it at gunpoint. Then Stan goes, Stokely goes, then Delilah and Mary Beth at the same time. Stan and Casey continue to tweak. Delilah is an alien as we see things crawling around under the skin on her face. She destroys Zeke's equipment before fleeing to a waiting car outside. The remaining 5 head to the football game as another brick in the wall blares. We see, this is from the class of '99 supergroup, and we see, I think they're the Harrington High Hornets, are just beating the shit out of whatever team they're playing. So we see montages of that while another brick in the wall plays. And the team starts infecting players of the opposing team after they make tackles and such. The kids arrive and theorize Principal Drake is the queen, as she's the principal would only make sense. Drake spots the kids and follows them to the gym. They tie her up in a volleyball net and try to make her take the scat. She refuses and acts scared. Zeke shoots her in the head and she just lays there, and they of course begin to think they made a mistake. She then gets back up with bugs crawling all over her face, and Mary Beth then dumps most of the scat they had left on her, and her whole body disintegrates. Stan volunteers to go check it out and see if it worked, and he gets some of the last of the scat from Zeke, and he takes off out to the field. Stokely plants a kiss on Stan as he heads to the football field. Stan makes it to the field to see the coach and the players just standing in the rain, and the coach has some worm-looking things coming out of his face. Safe to say it didn't work. Stan comes back and tries to get them to let him in. They slide him the last thing of scat and make him take the test before they'll let him in. But he just dumps it out, confirming that he is one of the aliens now. Stan tells Stokely how much better it is, but they refuse to let him in. Zeke says he may have more scat in his trunk. How convenient. Him and Casey take off to his car to get it, but they have to hide between buses because the football team is looking for him. Zeke reveals to Casey that he only brought Casey along to use as a decoy. Casey then runs and hides on a bus. Delilah is on the bus, and she taunts Casey as the football team breaks through the back of it, and he escapes through a vent in the roof. It must pay to be skinny, I know nothing about that. Zeke makes it to his car, and Miss Burke is there as well. They do a little flirting as Zeke spots some scat inside his car window laying on the floor. He gets in and starts the car, but she jumps through the window and tries to infect him. He puts on his seatbelt and intentionally crashes into a bus, sending her through the window. He crawls around on the ground a minute, but is startled when he sees Miss Drake's head walking around on tentacles, so he, gets up immediately and flees back to the gymnasium in the school. Back in the gym, Stokely and Mary Beth chat. Mary Beth then knocks Stokely down and reveals herself to be the queen. Casey comes back, and they run away as she chases after them in a true form. Mary Beth flies through the pool and wraps her tentacles around Stokely, pulling her down, knocking her out. Stokely regains consciousness in the pool and is able to get away before being infected. Her and Casey run away from the pool area as Mary Beth returns to human form before exiting the pool, naked. Zeke finds Stokely, but Mary Beth jumps in, and her and Stokely do the old "it's not me, it's her" deal. Mary Beth reveals she closed her nostrils from the inside of her nose and opened the cap end of the pen. Thus, all the scat fell at the bottom. As Zeke goes to stab Mary Beth with the scat, Stokely reveals to have been infected by stopping him. Casey grabs Stokely and locks her in an equipment locker. Zeke makes Casey take the test again, and Mary Beth throws Zeke across the locker room, knocking him out. Mary Beth turns human again and tries to seduce Casey into joining her. It doesn't work, and she turns back into her alien form. Her CGI ass then knocks all the lockers over, and he runs into the gym awaiting her. As soon as she appears, he turns on the bleachers so that they will retract. They are out. Like if you'd be in the gym watching a basketball game, he hits the thing and they retract back to the wall. And Casey makes it all the way through, jumping through the underneath of them and makes it out the other side. The alien, meanwhile, was trapped by the bleachers. Casey then stabs the alien in the eye with the last 3 pens of scat. The alien spits some parasites out, but they fall from Casey's face as soon as the alien dies. 3 things of scat, and that alien's a big-ass alien. It didn't take much. Casey goes to check on Stokely, and she's back to normal. And Zeke provides us with one last jump scare, banging on the storage cage, asking if it's over. We cut to 1 month later, and Coach Willis is acting like his old hard-ass self at practice. We hear a news report addressing the events of the previous month, saying that several faculty members are missing and that the local authorities and FBI don't believe the students who say aliens were involved. Surprise, surprise. Miss Burke watches Zeke at practice, and he hilariously lights up a cig on the field before getting yelled at by Coach Willis. I guess Zeke decided to go out for the football team after all this. Stan and Stokely watch the practice. Stokely isn't wearing all black for the first time in this film, and they kiss after Stan proclaims that he has no regrets about quitting the team. Delilah drops some magazines in front of Casey that he is on the cover of, and they have a little makeout session of their own before more news crews come to try to interview him. He states things sure have changed. We see some bullies carrying a kid, much like they did to him earlier in the film, smashing his nuts into the flagpole, reassuring things may have only changed for him and his new friends. Credits then roll. Positives: much like Varsity Blues last week, good young cast, good acting, good soundtrack, good pace, nice callback to other films while making it their own. Negatives: this is definitely a product of its time, meaning it's kind of just the alien version of Scream, which should come as no surprise since the writer of Scream did the rewrites. We get a bunch of cliched characters, but that should come as no surprise as a lot of teen movies and sci-fi horror movies have those. The CGI isn't really that good, but it's expected of films of this time. The CGI from the late 90s and early 2000s definitely has a dated look in today's day and age. Now, overall, in my opinion, this film holds up relatively well. It attained cult status and has become a classic, much like the films it was paying homage to. It's one of the better films of the latter part of the 90s in my opinion, and it is still shown on TV today, and has endured to become a popular, beloved sci-fi film. Popular with a certain segment, Now, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Latent Cassette podcast, and as a reminder, TK will join me next week as we'll cover Total Recall, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Thank you for listening, and I'd like to remind you to follow me on Twitter and on Facebook. We'll see you next week.